Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom as we get into the month of April, even further into this month. It's hard to believe how fast the time goes by every month, and we are leading up to June, which we are dedicating on this podcast to women in tabletop gaming. We're going to be releasing a little bit over 30 episodes, I believe, one every day, and then a few extra during the month, focusing all about women in tabletop gaming, whether they are podcasters, bloggers, YouTubers, streamers, content creators, people within the industry, people that are associated with companies or businesses. We are dedicating it all to women in tabletop gaming. We are doing a whole big thing. You can find out more information at womenintabletopgaming.com. We're going to have partners. We have White Wolf Entertainment and Chaosium. They're both RPG creators that have been around for a while. You might know White Wolf as the company that does Vampire the Masquerade or Werewolf or Wraith and so much more. Chaosium is behind the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and they are both partnering with us to do Women in Tabletop Gaming Month, along with some companies like Tabletop Loot, The Rook and the Raven, and more. We have podcasts like Hexes and Bows, The Broadswords, Fate and the Fable Maidens, and so many more. I mean, I just could keep going on and on about who is participating, but as that month gets closer, there'll be a lot more information. Definitely go check out womenintabletopgaming.com for more information and to find out how you can participate or be a partner with us. And with that, take a listen to this promo, and then we'll get into it with Tracy from the Broadswords Podcast.
Rashomon, a land where spirits roam and witches rule. 3 women are embroiled in a divine plot, and it is up to them to uncover why. Join the adventures of the Broadswords at thebroadswords.com.
And welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom, and today we continue the guests coming from the Broadswords Podcast with Tracy Gibbons. Tracy plays the character Keela on the podcast, and I just have to say she is one of my favorite characters. Welcome to the podcast, Tracy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I am so excited. It's one of those things where, especially with like actual play podcasts, getting to jump on them right when they start is amazing. And like, I was so ready for the Broadswords to come out, and it was everything I wanted and more from not only like Victoria as the DM, but as all of you players. It's so much fun to listen to.
That makes me so happy to hear.
Now, you're into a bunch of different things that we are here to talk about, and of course we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons and the Broadswords near the tail end of the episode, but one of the things that you're super into is an assortment of different video games. Are you a PC gamer, a console gamer, or are you both?
Primarily console. I remember my first console that I got as a kid was an N64 with a copy of Zelda Ocarina of Time because my mom apparently has great taste in video games. And I stuck with console for many years. I have dabbled in a little bit of PC gaming, and I played quite a bit of StarCraft 2 for a while and also League of Legends, but I kind of find that I always end up falling back to the console.
Okay. Do you have a preference? I know I hate to ask that question because, you know, there's always like, oh, I only like, you know, PlayStation. I only like Xbox. You know, I have the PlayStation. I've got the Xbox 360 and I've got the Switch. So I don't really care. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, PlayStation for life or anything. But do you have a preference on game system, or is it just whatever that comes out that you're grabbing?
Well, a little bit of a funny story, actually. When my boyfriend and I moved in together, we both had our own 360s, our own PS3s. He had a Wii. So, and also he had a GameCube and everything. So by the time we moved in together, we ended up with about 10 consoles in the house. But right now, set up, we have the 360, the PS3, and a PS4. I haven't gotten the Xbox One yet. And I think if I were to buy another console, it would probably be a Switch. I really want to check out the new Zelda game. It looks amazing.
Yeah, I am so old school. Like, I always date myself. Like, I remember back in my day, the Nintendo and playing the original Zelda, and I've never been like that Zelda gamer for any time. I'm not coordinated enough to do it, but I really want to play Breath of the Wild. But I know that, like, once I get it, either I'm going to go into it, like, put in 100 hours, or I'm going to be like, I spent my money on this and I can't play it, just like I knew I couldn't.
I have a feeling that it's one of those games that it's pretty much guaranteed to be 100 hours. I've just heard nothing but good things about it. And also, I'm definitely an old school Zelda fan. I played Ocarina of Time a dozen times. I actually have an Ocarina of Time tattoo, to give you an idea. So I feel like Breath of the Wild is just something I have to experience at some point.
Yeah, it is. I have tried it out before, like before I even got my Switch. I tried it out at a friend's place, and I was like, oh, this is pretty neat. I like some of the features of, like, your weapons break or your armor breaks, or you've got to actually be keeping involved in, like, cooking and hunting and doing all sorts of stuff. And that's really fascinating for me that they're putting that kind of stuff into games like that now.
See, I didn't even know about any of those things. I learned something new today.
Hooray! Now, for you, as far as the games that you play, is there a certain genre, or is there a certain, like, company or games that you love besides Zelda, like more recent games that you're, like, more into?
I am definitely a big BioWare fan. I know when Victoria came over, you talked with her about it a little bit, but I know that she kind of prefers some of the older BioWare stuff when I'm into a little bit of the newer stuff. My favorite is the Mass Effect trilogy and the Dragon Age games. I love all of them, and I've put a lot of time into all those games. Now,
I've tried Dragon Age. I think I tried Dragon Age 2 on a demo, and for some reason not that the game didn't click with me, but I think it's like the controls of trying to switch people that got me a little frustrated. But I've heard so much good stuff about that game series.
I can understand the controls, if you try and bounce between people, can be very frustrating, but I just honestly play it a little bit lazily. I just play my player character and don't bother bouncing between the other characters, and I just usually leave it on normal or easy. I know that just makes me sound like a bad gamer, that I've never tried to play it on hard or anything like that, but I really just play them for the story mostly. Mass Effect's a little bit different. I find that because you're just playing as the main character and not having to worry about bouncing around as much, I find it's a little bit easier to play for me, but I've heard other people say differently.
Right, and that is, I guess, one of the big differences is that with Dragon Age, you can bounce between the characters. In Mass Effect, you're Shepard, I believe, completely through the whole story. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now for Dragon Age, do you have, like, a favorite game, or is there a game that you're like, oh, like, if I wanted to get into Dragon Age, should I start with the first Dragon Age, or should I start with something else? Like, where would someone go to start?
That's an interesting question, because I find it to be the most difficult for Dragon Age, because the three games are very different. I find when you play Mass Effect as a series, the gameplay is a little bit more similar across the three games, but Dragon Age, everything, it almost feels like it's done by different companies almost, just because the gameplay is so different across the three. So I find that the first one has the strongest story, but some of the quests are very long and almost a little bit tiring at times. The second one's my personal favorite. A lot of people don't like it because it's not as open world, but for me, the characters are so compelling, and that's what really draws me to a game. Is I love games that have very compelling and strong characters. I want to be really invested in the characters, and that's why I love 2 so much. 3 brings back a little bit of that open world feeling again, but at the same time also has really strong characters. But you need to kind of get the first 2 games in to really be invested in what's going on in the world. So it's a little bit challenging to just jump into that one. So I guess long story short, I don't really have an answer to your question.
That's okay, because you and I are very similar as far as like what you're looking for in gameplay. Like, I want character, I want story, I am the person, and I've probably brought it up, I don't remember who I talked to, but it's like, I'm from that generation of, I'm going to talk to everybody in the town, I'm going to go back and talk to them after like I've gone on a quest or something to see if they say anything different, and I want like that backstory, I want that story, I want to be connected to the characters, and those are my type of games. And it's very like I'm a big Final Fantasy person. I love Final Fantasy games, but at the same time, nowadays I just don't have those hours to sink into them. It's like, no, I want my story.
And if you love Final Fantasy, another one of my favorite games, which I had mentioned to you earlier, is Lost Odyssey, which is a 360 exclusive. It also had excellent characters, really great story, and it's very similar gameplay to Final Fantasy since it's turn-based. But it is a bit of a time investment for a game. I think that my first playthrough took me something like 100 hours. So,
ooh, that's some investment there. 100 hours. Where did my time go?
I miss having that much time in my life.
I know, like I think back and I'm like, I used to play video games and then role play for like 20 hours a week and all sorts of stuff. And now it's like I get what I can and I'm happy with my hour or 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I got together, 4 of us got together last night and we played some Diablo 3, and I think it was the first time that I've played a game in about 2 weeks.
See, that's the one thing with which it's funny because I got the Switch, and so I'm playing like Mario Kart and whatever, or Stardew Valley on there. And at the same time, I'm like, I could have been playing on my 3DS, but I don't know why I wasn't. So like, I feel bad because I have all these 3DS games I've never played, but now I'm playing on the Switch and I just feel bad. I'm like, oh, I should have been playing this all along and spending my 30 minutes with you, DS.
Yeah, my DS is one of those things that goes through periods of time where it collects dust. But I swear I love it.
Right, exactly. My Animal Crossing people are always like, we haven't seen you in 365 days.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops. Let me start weeding the town and cleaning everything up and whatnot. Now, for Lost Odyssey, because I remember when that came out, and I love the graphics. I heard it had a good story. Like, is it like a fantasy game, or is it a mixture, like a blend of fantasy and something else?
It's quite fantasy. I honestly haven't played a lot of JRPGs in my life, and I've actually never finished a Final Fantasy game because I'm a bad gamer. But it still felt very, very much like a true fantasy game to me. And even, the combat's turn-based, and it just feels it feels a lot like what I think Final Fantasy feels like. But I haven't put enough time into Final Fantasy to say that with any sort of definitiveness.
Oh, that's okay. But is that a game where you would be like, oh, if I like, because again, I don't have like an Xbox One, so I don't know. But I wonder, is it available as like one of those games where you can get it for the Xbox One and play it? I don't know.
I don't know, but I'll Google after this and I'll email you and let you know.
See, because if it's available for that, because like my Xbox 360 is like on its last legs. I think my kids are killing it because there are times where it doesn't start up anymore, and then it starts up later, and I don't know what they've done. They've done something to it.
Yeah, I understand. I've discovered that my 360 can't go into vertical mode anymore because nothing works. I can only do it when it's down. So I understand it's on its last legs too.
But I've had that since, let's see here, Xbox 360. I think I've had mine since 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. It's lasted a while.
It's pretty impressive you haven't gotten the red rings of death yet.
No, I never did, and I guess I'm grateful. But again, I think at one point it was only being used to like watch Netflix for a while.
Oh yeah, our machines always, we let them down for a little while and turn them into Netflix machines. It always happens.
Now for Dragon Age, I know you have your love of the characters and their stories. Do you have a favorite character that you gravitate towards, that you're like, I love this character from Dragon Age and he or she is my favorite?
See, I thought about that for a while, and I guess I have two answers. The one character that I love is Meryl from Dragon Age 2, because I find her to be sort of relatable to me sometimes. And I've only done one cosplay in my life, and it was Meryl. And I also really love the character Fenris. He's a bit of the very damaged but lovable sort of guy.
Mm-hmm. And now on the flip side, going from fantasy to like the sci-fi realm of Mass Effect, again, I know with Mass Effect, I've always been told you should play them through 1, 2, 3, because like what you do in 1 affects what happens in 2, and like so on. Like what draws you to that game is it again story and characters and the development of such?
Absolutely, that's what got me first invested, was the story and the characters. The combat is great as well. I prefer the combat in Mass Effect over Dragon Age quite a bit, and I think that's why I've probably played through Mass Effect more times. But in the beginning, it's also the story and the characters that I really love. BioWare has a way of making very well-rounded characters that you love, but you also love them because they're flawed.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite game? Like, because I've always heard like a lot of people love Mass Effect 2. Is that the same for you, or do you prefer one or 3?
I'm a little bit sacrilegious in the Mass Effect community because I love 3, even though many people vilify it because of the ending,
mm-hmm.
which I can understand in a way, but just even if the ending wasn't perfect, the ride to get there throughout Mass Effect 3 was so good that it makes me love it so much. I don't even care that the ending wasn't perfect. It was just too enjoyable the whole way through. I cried playing it. I laughed playing it. It was fantastic the whole way.
That's awesome. Like, I love those games where you get so attached to like what's been going on, and you've invested that time and energy, and you get those emotions from it, and it's so well worth it in the end. And just to have that connection with a video game and those, like what has been done in that game.
It's funny when you say connection with a video game, I think people who don't play video games think it's ridiculous. You know, like I love these characters. I have little figurines that are sitting around my office, and anybody who comes in who doesn't play video games, they're like, why do you have these figurines of aliens sitting on your bookshelf, and why do you have a t-shirt with an alien on it? But it's true that you just, especially because when you watch a movie, you're watching these characters for 2 hours. When you're playing a video game, you're spending, anywhere upwards of 20 hours with them, and you just get so much more invested because of that amount of time that you have with them.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that a movie, you get that 2 hours, but with especially with a game like Mass Effect, where you're sinking in so much time, like you're building those connections. And I mean, there were games that I played as a kid where like things would happen, and it's like even the games that are like on the railroad of, okay, this person is going to die no matter what, and it still gives you that heartache. And it's like, it still hurts. Yeah, I spent like 30 hours like leveling that character up and investing my time in that character. And it's like, and now that character's gone. It is heartbreaking at times.
It's true. Sometimes it feels like you lose a friend.
Now, again, with Mass Effect, I do have to ask, do you have a favorite character in that game?
My answer for Mass Effect is more definitive than Dragon Age, because my favorite character has always been and always will be Garrus Vakarian. He's the best.
He's the best. I heard somebody else told me that Garrus was their favorite, And
that would have been Victoria. I'm pretty sure it was Victoria.
I think I had someone more recently tell me that too, and they said because Garrus is a romance option, correct?
Oh, he is.
And they said that on their, I think it was a person I just spoke with a couple days, like a couple days before your recording, they had said that on their second playthrough, they decided not to romance Garrus, and they said it was really hard not to do because I guess he gets attached to another NPC type character, and they're like, no, I don't want him to be with that person. Like, she was so upset about it, and I was like, see, that's the character right there that you connect to.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, on top of video games and console games, you also love a major franchise that Disney now owns, and we had the release of the 8th movie, which was The Last Jedi, and I think this year sometime we have the standalone Han Solo movie, and you are into Star Wars.
Oh, yes, I'm very into Star Wars. And actually, speaking of the Han Solo movie, it's coming out in May already. I feel like I'm so spoiled to get it so soon after Last Jedi came out.
I know, we live in a world where I guess, you know, I was born in 79, so I missed like the original releases of the movies. But I saw them on videotape, and I grew up with them, and I grew up with like the toys and everything. And there was definitely like that period of time where after the prequels were done, you're like, there's never going to be another Star Wars made until George Lucas is dead and somebody else can like take control. You never in anyone's wildest dreams would you say, like, if you had said 10 years ago, we're going to have a Star Wars movie every year for the foreseeable future, they would say no, or they'd be like, no, as long as it, or, you know, they'd be like, no, I don't want George Lucas to even touch the franchise anymore. But like we're like in this golden era of Star Wars.
It's so true that we're in a golden era. I remember when Force Awakens came out, you know, of course I was getting hyped because you heard about Disney buying Lucasfilms, and you know that they're going to do something with it, and they start to, you know, release little tidbits. When Force Awakens came out, I actually didn't watch any of the trailers. So I got tickets on opening night, and I was a little bit nervous going into it because my first experience with seeing Star Wars in theaters was going to see Episode 3.
Okay.
And it was actually the first Star Wars movie that I ever watched was Episode 3. So it's kind of funny that I end up getting so into it, considering it's one of my least favorites now.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I think because my last experience seeing Star Wars in theater had been so subpar, I was a little bit nervous with Force Awakens. I was like, oh my God, is this going to be the prequel trilogy all over again? And the moment that the music played and the scroll began, I was crying so hard. I think it was just that moment of joy of realizing that it's like, okay, Star Wars is back. I cried through literally the whole movie. As you can tell from this short interview already, I cry a lot. But I cried through basically the whole movie, and I was just so overjoyed that not only is Star Wars back, but that they did a good job with it.
Exactly. And I know for me, when Disney bought it, I was like, okay, I'm happy with this, and I'm happy with the announcement of new movie every year, essentially. I tried my very best to not watch any trailers, but then like it became to the point where like I would go see a movie and it's like, oh, you know, great, there's a Star Wars trailer, and I can't avoid that. But it was definitely one of those things where I was really interested in getting to have more Star Wars, because there's certain things where you can always have too much of, and I think Star Wars falls in the opposite category. You can always have more Star Wars. And Force Awakens, loved all the new characters, and I really liked how they balanced the you know, Han Solo and Leia and Chewbacca with Rey and Finn and Poe and what's going on there, and Kylo Ren, or Ben if you want to call him Ben. And I liked that, and I liked the balance that they struck. And then with Last Jedi, I liked it even more because I think that they really hit some of those like key Star Wars things that people are always like, I need this in my Star Wars movie. And I like so good.
Yeah, it's been interesting seeing the reception that's been coming out for Last Jedi because I loved it so much. I'm one of those people that's very pro Last Jedi. I thought that they did a good job of maintaining the feel of Star Wars, while at the same time, they were also trying to throw some of these traditions that have been created out the window. I like that they challenge some of the tropes that they created themselves within the earlier movies. And I thought it was a great approach for it. Just in general, I was a big fan of Last Jedi, and I definitely agree with you that I'm very happy with what they did with it. And also, I really liked Rogue One. I thought that it just fit in so well with the original trilogy. I thought they did a great job with that too.
Oh, I loved Rogue One, and I went in with like the lowest expectations for Rogue One because I was like, I don't know, I'm not comfortable, not comfortable, but I'm like, you're going into like this unknown commodity of what are they going to do, and for me, like Rogue One, it does start like slow, and I'm okay with that now after having watched it a few times because you're getting to know the characters and what's going on. But by the end of it, like that last, let's say, hour of the movie is everything I ever want in like a Star Wars movie, with the space battle and the ground battle and like all the stuff with the characters. And like the amazing thing that they did is make you fall in love with characters that then they're going to rip your heart out at the end.
Oh yeah, you know it's going to happen. You know it's coming. But when it happened, it was still so heart-wrenching.
Oh, when K2SO got it, I was like, no, like that was my personal heartbreak right there. Like the droid.
Oh yeah, because they did such a good job with him. And also, I'm a big Firefly fan. And when I found out that Alan Tudyk was voicing a droid, I think I did a dance in my living room. I was so excited, and I knew he was going to be great. And when he died, and he died in just such a perfect way, I was so heartbroken.
Oh, whenever Alan Tudyk shows up in something or in the credits, or you get like that notification, like, oh, Alan Tudyk's been cast in this movie as like a voice, you're like, I need to watch that because Alan Tudyk is like everything.
He just kills it every time. I've never seen something that Alan Tudyk does that I don't enjoy immensely. I even rewatched Dodgeball about a month ago because Alan Tudyk was in it, and he was just so funny, even as this ridiculous Steve the Pirate character.
He is awesome. Now, you started with Revenge of the Sith as your first Star Wars movie?
Oh yeah, I went on opening night with a friend of mine. I hadn't even watched any of the Star Wars movies up until that point. I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I walked out, and I remember just feeling like I was thinking to myself, why does everybody like Star Wars this much when this is what it's all about? And I would have been around, I think I would have been around 11 or 12 at the time. I can't remember off the top of my head what year that came out, but I was pretty young. And after that, I actually didn't touch the Star Wars movies again until I was probably about 18 and moved out and had my first roommate, and he had all the Star Wars movies on DVD, and I was like, all right, you know what, it's time. And then it changed everything.
It did. I remember seeing them on videotape, and I was like, I like these movies. I like them a lot. And I have to say, and I don't know if I've ever admitted this on the podcast, but when episode 1 came out, I saw it in theaters like 12 times.
Oh, now that don't feel bad about admitting that, because now that I've watched the original trilogy and now that I've fallen in love with it, I've seen the prequel trilogies probably about a dozen times myself. And I think that even though I didn't experience going to see episode 1 in theaters myself, I think that there's something really special about a new Star Wars trilogy starting. And even though it has I should say one of the worst characters in film period ever with Jar Jar Binks, I still think that it's still Star Wars, and there are still things I love about it. And let's be real, just Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi just makes all three films worth watching.
Oh, absolutely. That is the one movie that I really want them to announce, maybe for next year, the year after. I want them to say, Ewan McGregor, an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, please. Thank you.
Yes, please. That would make me so happy. I'm very excited to have a Han Solo movie, but if Ewan McGregor comes back as Obi-Wan, that would just bring me just too much joy.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Now, last question for Star Wars is, out of the new bunch of characters that we have, do you have a favorite, or is it like trying to pick children at this point? Like, you've got Rey, but Finn is so nice too, and
it is like picking children, but at the same time, I remember actually out of the new movies, well, we'll just talk about between Force Awakens and Last Jedi. Obviously, Rogue One's a new movie, but it's not the new trilogy. But I remember when I was watching Force Awakens, and there was the moment near the end where Rey catches the lightsaber and then the Skywalker theme comes on. That for me was the moment of the new films. And the reason why was it just gave me so many feelings about having Rey as the main character, and about having a woman lead in a Star Wars movie and have her be this very powerful Jedi. It was a very emotional moment for me, because don't get me wrong, in the original trilogy, you have Leia, and Leia's fantastic. And they imply that she is Force sensitive, but they never gave her, she was never the main character the way that Luke was, and the way that Rey is now. And in the prequel trilogy, I mean, Padme, she was so fantastic in Phantom Menace. And then in episode 2, she started to, she was still cool. And then in episode 3, they just really destroyed her character. And it was so heart-wrenching for me, because she could have been so cool. And then there's just the scene where I just remember, Anakin, you're hurting me. Like, what were they thinking? But my point is that when Rey came out, and she's strong, she's a badass, she's a fighter, and that meant a lot to me. I love them all, but Rey will always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I have a daughter, and her middle name is Leia, and oh my God,
that's amazing.
We got to take them all to go see Last Jedi. Like, they've seen Phantom Menace, but they've not seen any of the other trilogy or any of the other movies at all. And we're like, okay, they handled Wonder Woman fine. That was no issue. So we're like, okay, we'll take them to go see Last Jedi, because they were talking about him, interested. And I really like that there's a character like Rey that's there for my daughter. If she so chooses to be inspired by her character, that's out there for her. That there's those characters now in the series that are there just besides Princess Leia.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me so happy when I see little girls dressed up in Rey costumes. That just is wonderful. But let me also say, in the new movie Last Jedi, I want to give a shout out to Rose Tico, because I think that she's also a really awesome female character. And the fact that she's a woman of color, and the fact that Star Wars includes a main character who's a woman of color, is just fantastic to me too. I love the fact that they're trying to set a new precedent in film of getting away from just white men basically being in every single role in film. I really like that Star Wars is doing that, because they're such a popular film series and they're such a trendsetter. I think that it's going to help change film and push it in the right direction.
Oh, definitely. I love the character, and the one thing that I loved is that after the movie came out, and I don't know if it was coordinated for when the movie came out or if it came out a few weeks ahead of time, but there's a book that focuses on her and her sister called Cobalt Squadron, and that is on my list of things to read, because I want to know more about those two characters.
Yeah, I definitely want to read that too. And when Force Awakens came out, I bought a few of the companion books and really enjoyed them. And I've been meaning to read some of the Last Jedi companion books as well, because they also look awesome.
They do. And it's so I know for me personally, I grew up reading all the what they call the Legends books now, the extended universe. but I'm really interested to dive into some of these books that they're pushing out now that do focus on things that aren't tied into the movie directly, to where you can like get to know some of the characters in the background, or like in the Cobalt Squadron case, you get to know more about like Rose's sister and their relationship. And it's like, those are the things I love, is to dive into getting to know those background characters, or not with Rose is like a main character, but getting to just get to know them more than what I've seen on the screen.
Yeah, and then when you go and you watch it again, it means that much more. And for me, with, previously speaking about Mass Effect and Dragon Age as well, I've also read a lot of the books and the comics that are associated with those games, because even though they're a trove of information, you learn a lot about the characters, I just still love that little bit more, because when you go back and either play the game or watch the movie, it just makes you appreciate them that little bit more.
Exactly. And that's just it's one of the things that you get to have the book or the comic and get that part, but it makes you appreciate the movie or the video game just that much more when you get to see it or play it again.
Right, exactly.
Now we turn to, I guess you would call this a new fandom for yourself, or a new thing that you're like heavily invested in. And that is role-playing, or I guess Dungeons and Dragons, is correct?
Yes, it's pretty new for me.
How did you get into Dungeons and Dragons?
I played Dungeons and Dragons for the first time when I think I would have been in elementary school at the time, so I would have been around 12 or 13. And there was a group of us in my class who we would very often get together on Friday or Saturday nights, and we'd drink shitty energy drinks, and we would play video games a lot of time. But one night they wanted to do Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, oh, I've never played it, but I really had wanted to try it at that point. So I don't really remember much about it. I had like a pre-made character. We did a one-shot. It was too many years ago for me to remember, but we did that once. And then I think we got together and did something very similar another time. And that was about it. And I didn't make my own character, so I really wasn't invested. I feel like it was kind of just going through the motions of battle. So I remember leaving like, oh, that was fun, but I didn't see myself really diving into it until I started talking to Victoria.
It's all Victoria's fault.
Yeah, blame it on Victoria.
Now, how did you and Victoria, you guys game together, or just something like is brought up as casually like, hey, you want to play Dungeons and Dragons? Well,
Victoria and I met in a fitness Facebook group probably about 2 years ago now. And there was a subgroup in that group for gaming. And I think that she had posted in there about Dragon Age or something like that. And we had just kind of started messaging back and forth. We were talking about Dragon Age, and Dragon Age Inquisition had just recently come out around that time. So we were talking about Dragon Age a lot, but we also both enjoyed Mass Effect. And that was kind of where we started. And also we talked about Star Wars. There are a lot of interests that Victoria and I share, as you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And we started talking about Star Wars, and she mentioned to me that she was interested in getting together a group for a Star Wars RPG. And I was like, yeah, let's try it. And so that was where it started a little bit, was we had done just a couple rounds of the Star Wars RPG. There was a pretty big group of us, and we were all kind of still learning the rules a little bit, and it was a little bit stumbly, but it was really fun. And then shortly after we had done that, Victoria had approached the three of us, so Bianca, Kristen, and myself. She mentioned that she was looking to start a D&D podcast and asked if we'd be interested. And I think the reason why she picked me in particular, from my understanding, is that we get along very well. You know, obviously we have lots to talk about. We had already been talking for a year and a half or 2 years at that point. We had met up once and went to Fan Expo together, and we got a picture together with Kate Mulgrew. So we were definitely pretty good friends at that point. So she said that she wanted some people that she got along well with, because we would be talking a lot over the course of doing the podcast. And also she said that she was looking for people who had, well, we had distinguishing voices, and I guess I have a little bit of a unique voice, so that was one of the reasons as well.
And so your first like official, I guess I'd say official D&D was the Broadswords.
Yep, the first time that Victoria walked me through the whole process of creating my character, and the first time we had sat down and done a session where we did a character creation, and I didn't save my PDF properly and had to start from scratch again. But yeah, basically when we when we recorded episode 1, that was the first time that I had played my own character in D&D, and that was the first time when I had done something longer than a one-shot.
That is awesome. Now, I guess one of the things I wanted to ask, and we're going to probably start blending D&D and Broadswords as we continue to talk, is your character Keela. How did you decide that that was what you wanted to play as far as like race and class go?
It's actually a bit of a funny story, because when I first envisioned my character Keela, she was not going to be at all like who she became. When I first started thinking of it, for some reason I knew I was going to be an elf from moment one. I can't say exactly why, but when we very first discussed this, I hadn't read anything of the player's handbook. I didn't really know anything about any of the other races, but I was just like, I'm going to be an elf. That was set for me. And that was how I started with, I just can't say why, but I was just like, I'm an elf. This is what we're doing. Now, in terms of Bard, we were all kind of sitting and we were chatting about our different classes that we were going to go for. And when I first had her in my head, I thought she was going to be this lawful good, very kind, very very caring, very benevolent character was how I first envisioned her, which obviously is not how she turned out. But I was also originally thinking of making her a paladin or something along those lines. A paladin, maybe a cleric.
Mm-hmm.
And Victoria had said, she said, if you want to be a healer, because that's what we had decided, was that I was going to do a character that does a bit of healing, because at that point Bianca had said she wanted to be a barbarian, and Kristen had said that she wanted to be a wizard. And Victoria said, if you want to be a healer, you can also be a bard. And I thought about it, and I was like, I had never really thought much about being a bard before, and I thought it was really interesting. And the decision to make her a bard really played into how she changed as a character a little bit, because I was like, I just couldn't imagine a lawful good bard. I couldn't imagine a very benevolent bard. I always imagined bards as being a little bit mischievous, a little bit troublesome, usually not really lawful. They're a little bit more on the neutral or chaotic side. And she started to change a little bit in my head once I made the decision for her to be a bard.
That's awesome. I love hearing people talk about their like character creation, especially like new players, because there's classes that I don't tend to go towards. Like I don't go like wizard or warlock or sorcerer. I just don't stay like magic. And I've never played a bard just because, I would feel obligated in some ways to be like the voice of the group, depending on the group that I'm playing with. And I was like, I don't want to be the voice of the group. I want to, hit things. I want to be something else. But what is awesome about Keela is I love her inclusion as far as like the group dynamic is hilarious. And Keela, there are times where I'm like, I can't believe Keela just said that, and that like Keela's acting that way, like, oh my gosh. But at the same time, it's just so funny.
That was the fun thing was, when I was first thinking about creating a character, like I said, and I was thinking of her being this very benevolent, very nice character, I also kind of started to realize that doesn't make for very fun podcasting. And when we were getting into it, I had no idea what to expect of Bianca and Kristen's characters. We had talked a little bit about what our characters were going to be like, but ultimately you don't really know until you actually start to play together and role play together. So it was really fun and interesting for me when we started to play together and discovered that our characters antagonized each other a little bit. It turned into something really fun, and I found that I really enjoyed that we started to get a little bit of banter going, that we weren't the sort of characters that are, best friends, BFFs. We kind of cause trouble for each other a little bit, and I think it makes it more fun for us as the players, and also hopefully makes it more fun to listen to.
Oh, it definitely does. Before we dive more into the Broadswords, now that you've started, the D&D experience with the Broadswords, what are you role playing now more outside of that, or are you just sticking to the Broadswords at this point?
My plan is that I want to start role playing more outside of it. But as you know, when you have 30,000 hobbies, it's always hard to dedicate as much time to each hobby as you would like. But my next plan is that I have a couple friends here that live locally, and I'm really wanting to try DMing sometime. So my next plan is to try getting together a group and doing a bit of a one shot, almost like what I did back in high school, except with me being the DM this time and actually sort of knowing what's going on. And also, Victoria sometimes has a little bit of a chat group with a couple of us, and she'll once in a while say, hey, does anybody want to play some D&D? And it hasn't really worked out great yet, but I'm really looking forward to the night where I can just get a pre-made character and jump in and just kill some guys in a dungeon.
Yeah, that is the dream right there. And I know you're on Twitter, and like the one thing that I've grown or come to love like over the past years, like the D&D community is huge on Twitter, welcoming on Twitter, and there are times where they're like just people, hey, does anyone want to play a game for a one shot or like a few weeks, just like jump on and do it. And I'm like, dang, if I only had the time. Like there are so many opportunities.
Yeah, it's so true. Finding time as an adult when you have, a full-time job and multiple hobbies. And just as I was talking about earlier with video games where I barely even have time anymore, now I want to play more Dungeons and Dragons. I just need to stop sleeping and then I'll have more time. But I definitely, I did want to touch on how great the Twitter community is too, because I had a Twitter account that I made years ago and I sort of stopped using it. And then when we started with the Broadswords, I got back into it, and the community has been fantastic. Everybody's so nice. And it's also a really great way to hear what people are saying about the Broadswords. It's a great way to interact with everyone and to find out what they think about what we're doing.
Yeah, because like, and I was talking to someone else, I was like, I did not like Twitter. I had only joined it like on my personal account to follow a few like Will Wheaton or like a few celebrities that are on there like commenting where they'll comment or post on Twitter versus like Facebook or whatnot. And when I started the podcast, it was definitely something where I knew I needed to invest time and promote and engage with people. And the D&D community by and far is that community where this podcast is not like D&D centric. I talk to people that do role play, and I love to talk to actual play people and people that just love the game. And I love that I am included in people that are D&D people, like just talking about stuff and getting involved in conversations. And it's so warm and welcoming. Like I don't think I've ever seen anything negative come from at least like the people I follow or the things that I see retweeted. It's all supportive. It's all like, hey, let's build up the community. Let's help out this person that's going to be new, like to DM, or like, let's get new players involved. Like that's such a great positive aspect of Twitter that I love every day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because when I get into something new, one of the first things that I do is always look for a community because I'm so excited about it and I want to talk about it with other people. And the D&D community so far has been my favorite because you'll often see these little squabbles that happen if you're, following Mass Effect or Star Wars. People argue about whether this thing was good or that thing was good. But I think maybe because D&D is something that's so much of a choose your own adventure and everybody has their own way that they like to approach it. or for some reason, I don't know why, but the D&D community has just been the best. And I've never seen anybody say anything negative about anybody else. And that's all that you can really ask for.
Exactly. Now, switching back over to the Broadswords, what's been the I guess what's been one of like your highlights of gameplay so far? I know that as far as when we're recording now, episode 7 is out, which came out on January 12th. But have you had like that moment where you're like, damn, that was like my favorite thing I've ever done with this character?
Ooh, that's a good question. The thing about Keela that I'm having a lot of fun with is that I'm leaving her as a little bit of a veiled character right now, where I'm kind of letting loose a couple crumbs about who she is, but she's definitely not fully come into herself yet. And I want it to be a bit of a journey that I go on and that the listeners go on. But that's why in the last episode, in episode 7, where Keela had a little bit of an emotional moment where she was talking to the innkeeper about her past and not being able to let it go, it was a great moment for me because I was able to talk about something that I've known about Keela for a long time, back since I wrote her backstory. And I knew that she had this big, glaring, difficult thing that she had gone through, and it was still weighing very heavily on her. And she tries to be silly, and she tries to not take things seriously, but at the same time she is serious, and she had something horrible that she's still not really working through. And I really enjoyed being able to have that moment of showing that.
Okay, that's I love that. I think that's one of the things that I love is the way that Victoria and you all have come up with the story where you're not like a party that's been brought together, you know, as friends and everything, that you're all learning about your characters, and us as the audience, we're learning about it as the show goes on. And it's just so rewarding just to hear like those little, you know, as you said, like the little crumbs of backstory. It's like, I can't wait to hear what comes next. And like, that's one of the things that gets me is I love just like waiting. It's like, okay, maybe they'll talk about this, or maybe they'll talk about that today. It's so much fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a character's backstory is very important as part of fleshing them out. And for example, you know, we were talking about me getting into D&D and role playing a little bit. In terms of other podcasts, I've been getting into the Adventure Zone, you know, which I know many people who listen to Broadswords probably have listened to the Adventure Zone already. And one of my favorite things with that is listening to the characters' backstories, because it's fun to embarking on the adventures with them, but it's also really fun learning about why they are who they are. And it's really fun for me to also have this character. And, you know, even if I'm lying in bed sometimes and I can't sleep, I'll think about Keela, and I'll think about adventures that she's gone on in the past that have helped mold her into who she is.
Exactly. Now, I want to ask, like, as far as your as Keela and her interaction with Ylaris, like, I imagine that wasn't as planned as it was, as far as like their relationship is one of the things that I just crack up over there, and the way that they talk to each other, and like the way, like certain things, like Ylaris will do something and then Keela will like swoop in and be like, oh, well, you know, I get to sit up front now. Ha ha ha.
I'm glad you enjoyed that moment, because I had a lot of fun with that when we were recording that too.
Do you think they'll ever share friendship bracelets?
I absolutely think that they'll get there, but I think that they both need some time, because there are a lot of things that are actually a little bit similar about them. And sometimes I find in characters and also in people that when two people or characters are sort of similar, sometimes that'll kind of make them butt heads, because they share the less admirable traits about themselves. You know what I mean? Where I mean that in the sense that they have the same traits, and they're not always the best traits and their favorite traits. And sometimes when you see that in another person, sometimes you might get your hackles up a little bit or might not get along with them at first. But I think once they realize that they're actually kind of similar, and that it's not a bad thing, I think that they're going to start getting along well. But we'll see how long that's going to take before they can get there.
Yeah, that is definitely something. I mean, I think that's one of the great things is that with the Broadswords and you as a player and Kristen and Bianca, like it's just a joy to listen to how you all talk to each other and work as a group but not a group, and that's just so it's so much fun to listen to.
And also, I think that having Maypri as this really, really kind and caring character who sometimes has a bit of a short temper, but in general, she really cares about the people around her. I think that she's a really good balance and kind of stokes a bit of the strong personalities that are a little bit, Yulari's who's a little bit antagonistic at times, and Keela who sometimes causes mischief for the sake of causing mischief. I think that Maypri's a really good balance to keep both characters down to earth a little bit.
Oh, definitely. Like she's definitely that one character where it's like, okay, like you're like in the middle sometimes. And I know that there's like, I think is like episode 5 where it definitely, or maybe it's episode 4 where it seemed like, okay, Maypri and Keela were like on the one side and there's Yulari's like a load, and I felt bad for Yulari's, but at the same time, not really.
Was that when she had to drag her trunk behind the caravan?
Yeah, there was that one. I think there's another one where it's like, okay, like she's going to be over here and you guys are doing something. And it's just like there's so many good moments in the Broadswords.
That makes me really happy to hear.
Now, can you tell me anything that's coming up? Like anything that we should be looking out for in the future with like the Broadswords or Keela or anything else that's coming out?
I will say for Keela, I think that as listeners, there's going to be a lot revealed about her in the future. I think that there's a lot more to her than I've been able to express so far. And in terms of the podcast, I won't say anything in terms of the story because that's actually all brewing in Victoria's head, and I don't even know what's going to be coming up. It's all a surprise for me. But I honestly love having these surprises of never knowing what's going to be happening to our characters. But I just am so excited for the future. I'm so excited to see where things are going to go because, the Ilaris and Keela have met with the Hathrin, and they've had their Hathrin experiences, and we've gotten to know each of the characters individually a little bit better. And I think when we get them all together again, it's going to be very interesting.
Awesome. Now, for people that are listening to this podcast and they want to follow you on Twitter, what's the best place for them to do so?
Well, on Twitter, before you follow me, please follow the Broadswords on Twitter. We're at the Broadswords because I'm a little bit slow with responding to my Twitter sometimes, but we are very talkative on the Broadswords Twitter. If you want to follow me personally on Twitter, please do. My Twitter handle is CarouselOmbra1, which is, the word carousel, and then, excuse me, so it's the word carousel, Ombra, AMBRA, and then the number 1.
Awesome. And I'll have the links not only to your Twitter, but to the Broadswords Twitter and Facebook page and website and everything else so people can jump on board, because not only is the Broadswords awesome, and not only is the Broadswords an all-female actual play D&D podcast, but the Broadswords is a podcast that I love because the time needed to invest in it is not as much as other podcasts where some go an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and you can get a great story in 35-40 minutes. And that is one of the things that I love, because I can listen to a Broadswords episode in like my commute time, and that is just so great.
Yeah, you can listen to us while you do the dishes, while you do your laundry, and we'll make it much more interesting, I promise.
There you go. Well, Tracy, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to come on to my podcast and just talk all about the things that you love.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.